Hello, good evening and welcome to Arrow Cardiff. Tonight's teaching is the first of two on the subject of establishing a regular meditation practice, and this teaching will be recorded for posterity and will appear on the Arrow Cardiff YouTube channel. I'm Ngakma Nor'dzin and I'm technical administrator tonight, and the teacher tonight is Ngakma Nor'dzin, who has 40 years of experience of meditation practice. And as you may have seen on our events, Dilgyal Khyentse Rinpoche said, practitioners wear out their cushions, not the soles of their shoes. And to say more about how to establish a practice that might see you wearing out your cushion, this is Ngakma Nor'dzin.
Thank you. So, meditation practice. When people think of Buddhism, they think of meditation practice because I think everybody associates Buddhism with meditation practice. So what is the aim? Why do Buddhists meditate? And the primary aim of meditation is to discover reality, to discover the nature of mind, and to discover how our relationship with reality is distorted. And meditation enables us to look at this so we can sort out this distortion, learn to recognize the nature of mind, and learn to understand reality. Now, this might rest with people more as an aspiration than an activity. And that's fine. If it is an aspiration, it's a good aspiration to have. As aspirations go, wishing to understand the nature of mind and awaken the mind is a good one to have. But if you want to take that beyond merely an aspiration, then the thing you have to do is practice. And there's no getting around that. You have to engage with the path of Buddhism. This teaching is in the context of Buddhism. You have to engage with that path in order to gain the fruit of practice, which is realization, understanding reality, recognizing the nature of the mind. Now, what might our motivation be for entering into such a practice? Well, often we begin with wanting to be happier. I think that is quite a natural and normal feeling, that you see your life as unsatisfactory, or you find that you're not able to establish long-term happiness, and you become suspicious of that and wonder about that. And that might make you turn to spiritual practice. Again, this is a very good thing. This is a very good starting point. And then, having realized that spiritual practice can perhaps make you a happier person, then that is naturally followed by thinking, once you have some practice experience and you see that perhaps the mind is a little calmer, the mind is a little happier, then it naturally follows on from that, that you would like others to have that, that you would like others to be able to share in that increasing calmness and relaxation. The other reasons for practicing, and specifically for the sort of practice that I'm going to talk about over these two sessions, which is silent sitting practice, is that there are particular benefits of that practice that can only be attained through a silent sitting practice. Now, all schools of Buddhism have some manner of silent sitting practice, whether it's emphasized as the focus of their tradition or not, it will be there somewhere. So this is certainly true of the Zen tradition and the Theravadan tradition, and it's true of all the 4 schools of Buddhism, of Tibetan Buddhism. Now, when we first became Buddhists, we practiced with the Gelugpa school for about 5 years. And the emphasis seemed to very much be on chanting, that one practiced by chanting a sadhana or a druptaka, a text of practice. And that was really all we did for about 4 years, that we chanted this practice. But nevertheless, even though that was the focus of the teachings we were being given, the practices we were given, there was still this thing in the background there called calm abiding. And calm abiding is just another word for Shi-nè, the fundamental practice of for practitioners in the Aratea tradition, that we were encouraged to learn about calm abiding and to approach perhaps even just thinking about it. It was considered to be an advanced practice rather than a beginner's practice, but nevertheless there was the understanding that at some point in your path as a practitioner, you would have to engage in calm abiding practice. So it's there in all the schools. Now, in this practice that we used to chant, we chanted it every day. It took about, I think it was about 40 minutes, wasn't it? On a rush day, we could maybe do it in half an hour, but to do it sort of properly, it took about 40 minutes. So that was a fairly big commitment for people new to Buddhism, a daily 40-minute commitment. And I think it never ceases to amaze me how the distracted mind can be distracted even when you're engaged in something that is supposed to undermine distraction. So once you've been practicing a practice like that for about a year, you can practice it on automatic pilot and your mind can be off doing something else. And so it has to be questioned how much actual practice in terms of gaining realization and understanding the nature of the mind what we were doing while we were chanting that practice. And I think I would have to say from a personal point of view, the answer would be not very much. That isn't to say that for other people, it was the perfect path and they were making amazing progress and focus. But for me, it was not a great method of gaining the capacity to concentrate and recognize the nature of mind. Those sort of practices include things like taking refuge, generating the wish to be of benefit to all beings, and so on and so forth. Now, all of those sorts of practices, if your mind doesn't have the capacity to remain in focus on that practice, then you're not really doing it. If you are repeating a formula of refuge, but there's no sense of what it means to say, I take refuge in the Buddha. That is, I'm taking refuge in the fully awakened mind. If there's no sense of what that really encompasses in terms of your practice, when you're chanting that, then it's going to be of minimal benefit to you. And so practices such as calm abiding in that tradition, enable you to focus your mind so that when you engage in a sadhana, a chanting practice, the mind is focused on what you are engaging with throughout the practice. And then that explodes into an extraordinary practice that is most certainly can become a path to realization. But Shi-nè, the practice of silent sitting that we're going to talk about in these two sessions, and also to some extent the practice of latong, which is the practice that follows it, they put you on the spot straight away. So it isn't that you are building up to entering into a practice of focusing the mind. You start there. That's what happens if you practice Shi-nè right from the beginning.
Could I just interrupt a moment? What I should have said at the beginning as well was that questions are welcome at any time, and you can either use the raise hand feature on Zoom, or you can type questions into the chat box, and I will interrupt the Ngakma Nor'dzin and let her know what the questions are.
Now, I'd like you to imagine that you're sitting somewhere with a very large hole in front of you, a hole in the ground. And this hole in the ground is surrounded by pleasant environment. And it's a watertight hole, and you want to fill this hole with water to be a beautiful place to sit and gaze at the reflective surface of the water, a place for wildlife to flourish, a place to swim and enjoy the pleasure of being in the water. But at the moment, you have a perfect environment around your hole, and you have access to water, but your pool is empty. So this is an analogy for the perfect environment to practice, and the water that you're going to put into this pool to create the perfect enlightened environment. That is your practice. Now, you could fill this hole using a little medicine dropper bottle. So you squeeze the thing at the top and you drop some drops of water into the pool. Now, eventually that would fill the pool. It would. If you keep adding water, it will fill the pool. But it's going to take a very, very, very long time. If you truly want to fill that pool with water and enjoy the benefits of having that pool for yourself and for others, you want to get a pretty hefty hose pipe with a good flow into that pool, and you want to put that hose pipe on for at least an hour a day. And then your pool might start to fill up at a fairly reasonable rate. Now, you also have to bear in mind evaporation. As you'll all know from looking at puddles after it's rained, the shallow puddles disappear quicker than the deeper puddles. So while your pool is shallow, then the evaporation of things that distract you from practice, negative attitudes such as irritation, anger, jealousy, pride, they're all going to evaporate your pool. And so to begin with, in filling this pool, it may seem as though you're barely keeping pace with filling it and it's emptying as fast as you're filling it. It might feel as though the qualities of evaporation are much stronger than the qualities of feeling. But don't worry about that. If you keep adding practice to your pool, eventually you'll have a decent depth of water there. And as you well know, a deep pool, a deep puddle, doesn't evaporate as fast as a shallow puddle. So once you start to get some depth to that pool, then it seems to become easier to maintain that quality. it seems to become easier to carry on filling the pool. It gets topped up when it rains much more effectively than if it's this little shallow puddle that keeps disappearing. Now, these sort of analogies always break down at some point, but we're going to talk about how we can keep pouring our practice into this empty pool and develop this deep puddle to start with, and then eventually a proper pond, a large pool full of a body of practice that just gets purer and purer and stronger till nothing can make it evaporate, that it is going to be there forever. There'll always be a pool there. It's like an ocean. No questions as yet?
No questions at the moment.
Okay. Now, I'm going to start by, first of all, I'll tell you a little story. We met a lady once who attended a Vipassana course. The Theravadan tradition regularly offers 10-day Vipassana courses. Not sure why they're 10 days, maybe they're sometimes different periods of time. But way back at the beginning of my time as a practitioner, I attended 2 of these 10-day Theravadan Vipassana practices. And they're extremely intense. They are literally practicing continually. You are supervised by a teacher, by a lama, and they check that you're not going crazy. I think you do go slightly crazy, but you're practicing continually. But it's a practice with form, so you are very much looking at form that's arising in quite a tangible way. So it's a little bit different to the practices that we base our practice in the Aratea tradition. But we met this lady once because we've been giving people advice on sitting practice for over 30 years now. And we've met an incredible range of people's approaches and people's responses to being given the idea that it's important to practice. And this particular lady attended a 10-day Vipassana retreat. And in the summing up at the end of the retreat, she was told that it would be a good idea to maintain that practice for an hour every day for the rest of her life. And, well, I don't know about the rest of her life, because as far as I know, she's still alive, but she had done that, and she had maintained that for years. So that is one end of the spectrum, that somebody tells you this is a good idea, you see it's a good idea, and you do it. Now, the other end of that spectrum that we've encountered is people, I'm thinking of one person in particular, who really did genuinely want to establish a meditation practice, but had some sort of terrible aversion to it and was finding it completely impossible to get themselves sat on the cushion every day just practicing. It really was like some sort of neurosis, that they just couldn't do it. And what we did with this person was we set them up a program. So they bought a beautiful meditation cushion. So they had a flat cushion and a beautiful cushion that they put on top of the flat cushion. And for a period of time, they had to go to the cushion every day and touch it and appreciate the cushion. Then once that had become a habit, they then had to go to the cushion every day and sit on it. Just sit on it. And once that became easy, then they had to go to the cushion every day, sit on it, and take 3 focused breaths. And then when that became easy, then they were ready to actually start trying to practice. So that was quite a hurdle they had to overcome, but through approaching it in that manner, they were able to eventually overcome that aversion. I'm not saying it suddenly became easy for them, but the almost sort of gut level reaction to sitting on a meditation cushion, they had managed to overcome. Still no questions?
No.
I haven't really said anything that needs a question yet. So the first thing to look at is, where are you going to practice? Now, if you're lucky like us, you have a room in which you can practice, and that room has the sort of imagery you can see behind me. It's a room that's dedicated to that practice, and in theory that makes it easy to practice, makes it easy to establish a practice. In actuality, for some people that could be intimidating, that there's this room there that's sort of lurking and is always available, and yet it's still difficult to get there. We have very strange and complicated relationships with silent sitting practice. And the sort of things I'm going to mention, I'm not making them up. These are things that we have encountered.
We have a question.
Oh, right.
Yes. Question is it important to have a room? I sit practically everywhere. I don't have a structure.
I'm coming on to that.
Right.
So we're lucky that we have a room. At one point we had 2 rooms, but our son has moved into the second room, so we have 1 room at the moment. And we're very fortunate. We recognise we're very fortunate. But it isn't necessary to have a room. It isn't necessary to have a place that is special for your practice. However, if we're talking about a new practitioner, it will be easier if you can set up some parameters in the beginning. So you will find these are suggestions that will make it easier. Have a place where you sit, a place where you know you can be quiet and uninterrupted for a period of time. And that will make it easier to establish your practice. Now, this could be the spare bedroom. It doesn't need to be a designated bedroom. It could be an office, perhaps in your room, a room that's used for other things. It could be your lounge, as long as you are able to ensure that you have some time there when it's quiet and you're on your own. It could be your bedroom. It could be anywhere. It could be your garden, though in Britain that could be a problem because it rains a lot and it's pretty cold in the winter. But you could perhaps have somewhere in the garden that you were able to practice in that way. Most people find it useful to have some sort of focus that, in a sense, says, this is where I meditate. So you could light a candle. Now, candles are absolutely not compulsory for meditation practice, even though in films and television series, you always know if somebody's been meditating because there's hundreds of candles there. Candles are not required. You can meditate without a candle. But if you want to have some sort of focus, if you find that makes it easier, then you could have a picture of your teacher if you have a teacher. You could have a picture of Guru Rinpoche or Shakyamuni Buddha, or if you're engaged in Yidam practice, you could have a picture of the Yidam. Now, if it is that you can't have something on the wall that is always there for other people to see, my mother, for example, was very unhappy about me becoming a Buddhist. and would very much not have been happy about any Buddhist image being in any shared room when I was living at her house. That's fair enough. If this was her house, she had that right. So if you're in a situation like that, there are various ways you can get around that. You could have a cupboard with doors that close. And then when you are sitting there, you just open up the cupboard and there is your shrine. There is your images in front of you. Alternatively, you could just have some sort of folder. Oh, I meant to bring up that little pop-up book, never mind.
You could fetch it if you like.
It's on the dining room table.
Excuse
Ngakpa, I have meant to bring this book up to show you.
This is the job of technical support.
Thank you. You could create maybe an A4 folder, 2 sides, and put some pictures on there and maybe the mantra that you're practicing. And then wherever you're sitting, you just open that up, and then that space becomes your shrine room. That becomes the place that you practice. We'll just wait for Ngakpa to come back. I think there's a question. Lighting, that's a good question. Dimmed lighting could be a good idea because very bright light can be a little bit distracting and it makes it more difficult to keep your eyes open. But you don't want the lights to be so dim that you tend to become sleepy. So it's getting that balance between too bright and too dim. Everything in Buddhism is about getting a balance. What excites the mind, what it dulls the mind. This is the continual game we are playing. Now this is a book called Tibetan Buddhist Altars. Now, I'm not recommending this. I think it's a little bit naff actually, but I think it's an interesting idea because first of all, it opens out and then it's got pop-up images. So it folds out and there is a picture of Shakyamuni Buddha. It's actually a 3D pop-up image. And then at the front, there's a little flap that opens. You have to do things in reverse. It's like doing something in a mirror. There is a little bit about Shakyamuni Buddha there. So can you see that enough to get an idea of what it looks like? So you could make something like this. You could have the back and the 2 sides that you could put images on. And then you could have at the bottom your mantra, whatever it is that you're practicing. And this folds away to something very small and neat. You could have a nondescript cover if you have somebody in your household who's not very keen on you being a practitioner, or you may occasionally people want to keep it secret or private for a period of time. So if you want to be an undercover Buddhist practitioner, then you can do that. But it just would give you a focus of something to sit in front of. So let's talk next about seating. I answered the question back, didn't I?
Yes.
In pictures, again, things you see on television or in magazines and stuff like that, they're usually pictures of beautiful women who appear to be adepts in hatha yoga, sitting cross-legged with their hands in some sort of holy meditation position, completely straight back. They look totally relaxed and serene, and everybody is supposed to think that's how you meditate, and it's this wonderful, serene, magical experience from the minute you get into that position. Now, anyone who has sat in a position like that, who doesn't happen to be a Hatha Yoga adept, will soon find that their knees get tired, their arms get tired, their back gets tired, their neck gets tired. And you cannot maintain a position like that for any length of time. Now, in order to practice silent sitting, it's important to be able to be still. You need to be still and comfortable for a reasonable length of time. So you need to be in a position that you can maintain reasonably comfortably for a reasonable length of time. I'm going to talk about what's a reasonable length of time later. So there's nothing particularly holy about cushions. There's nothing particularly holy about the ideal posture, which is said to be full lotus posture. If you can sit in full lotus posture and it's comfortable, it has the quality of giving you a very stable base and a straight back. But unless you've been able to sit in that posture since childhood and have maintained that, it's unlikely to be a comfortable position. I used to be able to sit in full lotus in my 20s, but it was never wholly comfortable. It was always a little bit hard on the ankles, and I certainly wouldn't even attempt it now. Now I'm in my 60s. So don't feel that because you can't sit on cushions cross-legged that you can't meditate. That would be nonsense. This is a distraction. We're very good at creating distractions as to why meditation is difficult. And the thing about the practice of Shi-nè is that Shi-nè itself is quite difficult. So you don't really want to add other difficulties that can be overcome to the practice of Shi-nè. Now, I've always been somebody who liked to sit on a cushion, a large flat cushion, and then a fairly reasonable height, fairly solid cushion on top of that, sitting cross-legged. Always found that very comfortable. I'd say I found that comfortable for 39 years, and that was my preferred meditation posture. But recently I've been practicing for longer periods of time than I had done in the past. And practicing through the winter, especially, sitting on the floor, even on cushions, is actually quite cold. You've got all the drafts down on the floor. And I started to find that I was becoming increasingly stiff in my knees and my hips. And so I have recently moved into a very comfortable armchair. And it's surprisingly warmer, even though we're not in midwinter anymore. It is surprisingly warmer being that much higher off the ground. Not only am I sitting in a very comfortable armchair, I sit in an electric blanket in a very comfortable armchair. So the parts of me that tend to get a bit stiff when I'm sitting, which is my hips and my knees, I have wrapped in an electric blanket on its lowest setting so that I stay warm, and it's very comfortable. So that's not a problem. Adopting any sort of sitting position, any sort of additions, supports, types of sitting that you want to do, cushions, stools, chairs, whatever. The only factors that setup needs to have for you is that you're in a position you can stay alert. So I've actually changed the legs on my chair, my armchair that I've got in my sitting room, that I bought shorter front legs for it to make it more upright. So it's a standard armchair but it was quite sort of laid back. So now it's much more upright. So I'm able to sit nice and upright, but I still have the comfort of it being an armchair. I have an extra couple of cushions in it to support my back, and I'm very comfortable. Thank you very much. Now, some people prefer to sit on a regular dining chair, sort of chair, but because I'm very short and don't have long legs, they're always too high for me. You don't want a chair that's too high or too low for you. Everything has to be balanced, just about right. Not too high, not too low, not too soft, not too hard, not too relaxed, not too tense. It's getting these balances, because what we're aiming for is to be able to sit still for a reasonable period of time. I keep saying this, reasonable period of time. Now, the importance of sitting still cannot really be overstressed. I think there can be a tendency to fidget. And when we start to meditate, one of the ways that we can become distracted is that suddenly there are little itches, like a bit of an itch on your skull, and you've got to scratch it. Or you notice that your shawl's fallen off your shoulders, so straighten up your shawl. And then, I've got the cushion quite right, so you have to adjust your cushion. And it's very, I've sometimes watched people at the beginning of a meditation session, and they can take 10 minutes to nest. So this has to be adjusted, that has to be adjusted, and then they get it right. Oh, I've forgotten to get myself a drink, so they go and get themselves a drink. And oh, I haven't got the clock where I can see it, so then you have to move the clock so the clock's where you can see it, and so on and so on and so forth. So the thing about having a place where you meditate, that it's always the same place that you meditate, is that all this is already set up for you. So you have your clock where you can see it. You have a routine that you make yourself a drink that is there. I always have just a mug of hot water in case I need to wet my throat, my mouth. You have your chair or your cushions, your meditation strap, your shawl, if you wear a shawl, whatever you need to be warm enough, all that is already set up. Now, if you don't have a room that you can designate as your meditation room, try and have this set up as something you can just produce, and it's there and you sit down. It isn't something you've got to take 10 minutes preparing, because all these things get in the way of dedicating your time to practice. I've just been working on Goodbye Forever, Volume 2, Ngakpa Rinpoche's second book in the Goodbye Forever series. And at one point, towards the end of this book, he's talking with Dudjom Rinpoche, and Dudjom Rinpoche is saying, you must have a Sangyom, so you must have a spiritual wife. And Rinpoche asks Kyabje Dudjom Rinpoche whether it would be a good idea to get meet with a Tibetan lady to be his Sangyom. And Kyabje Dudjom Rinpoche says, no, that would be no good. Tibetans, they just set up the offering bowls and no real practice. That might be interesting for us to hear. I think just as we have church on Sunday Christians, because Tibetans are ethnically Buddhist, they have Gompa on Friday practitioners, or whatever day it is they go to the Gompa, and all they may do in terms of being practitioners at home is set up the offering bowls. They probably have a shrine, they set up the offering bowls, they'll light a candle, they'll say a few mantras, and that is their practice. Now, if we're going back to our hose pipe and we've got our hose pipe full on, that's not enough. That is not going to fill the pool. There has to be this time on the cushion practicing. Are you trying to attack my attention?
We have a question. Anna, you have a question. Please unmute.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm finding this really helpful. I'm a real fidget. Not so much kind of getting things set up, but I'm quite itchy. I'll just be doing this. And once you start itching one place, then you wait and then another one comes up. I just wondered what advice you have for that, because I kind of feel so far I've kind of tried to not be too hard on myself and just let myself have the odd itch, but because I can't not do it. So do you just kind of get over it in time, or how does it work?
Well, I think there are two approaches to this. Yes, I think to a certain extent, as the psychophysical body relaxes and you become more used to your sitting practice, those sort of things do subside, but that may take time. But if you want to actually address it, then you could decide to not respond to the itch when it first happens, and maybe just put your attention on the itch or whatever it is, and breathe it away in the same way that you breathe away a thought in the practice of Shi-nè. So you just bring your attention to whatever it is, and rather than following that urge to scratch it, you just focus on it. And as you breathe out, you try and let the sensation dissolve, or you enter the dimension of the sensation and try and let go of the definition of itch that has to be scratched. Now, this is actually quite subtle practice, and don't expect it to be immediately successful, but you could try working with that. And then if after attempting that for a few moments, it's just driving you mad, it's better to scratch it and then just go back to being still. It's this thing of getting the balance between, is this a distraction that I can work with and let go as a distraction, or is it an actual physical something that needs to be addressed, and it's actually less distracting just to quickly address it and then carry on. So only you can judge that. You can work with that in that way and see how it goes.
Thank you.
Now, if just to go back to the place of sitting, there's always the possibility of a curtain, of course. So you could curtain off part of a room so that when that curtain is drawn, it becomes your shrine room. So you could maybe even have that curtain in the colors of a shrine room, or with some sort of shrine room type imagery on it. And then when that curtain is drawn, you are then in your practice room. So there was a question that came up about sitting wherever you find yourself and practicing wherever you find yourself. That is absolutely fine if that works and if you're able to maintain that as a discipline. That would be how we would hope it would move towards. That once one's meditation practice is established, then yes, you can practice anywhere. You're in a bus stop waiting to catch a bus and it's late. A moment, 5 minutes to meditate. You're on a train journey that's half an hour. You could spend some of that time meditation. You're out for a walk in the park and there's a bench or a nice piece of grass. You could just sit and practice. Go out into the garden, stop for a moment while you're in your lounge, stand for a few minutes in the kitchen, All these are possibilities, but these are possibilities that exist more once you have established your daily practice. I wouldn't advise starting there. So if you're finding that this is a way of practicing that functions for you, and you're being honest about that, and it is functioning for you, then that's brilliant. But here I'm talking more about a beginner establishing a practice. So now I'm going to talk about the length of time of practice. And we have always said at Arrowling Cardiff, we had a little slogan going at one point: have you had your 10 a day? And this was that meant that have you had your meditation practice of 10 minutes today? Now, 10 minutes isn't very long, but 10 minutes from nothing can feel like quite a long time. So it's not a bad place to start. 10 minutes of practice every day is establishing a very good pattern. And this, I think, something that perhaps people have misunderstood from us saying this 10 minutes a day in the past, is that does not mean I have 10 minutes. I go to the meditation room, I sort out my cushions, I set up my offering bowls, I get my shawl on properly, I make sure I've got my drink, I sit down, 7 minutes is gone. Oh, right, 3 minutes. And I sit for 3 minutes. No, that's not what we're talking about when we say 10 minutes a day. The 10 minutes a day practice starts when you are able to be still. Was it Anna with the itching? If there's itching, don't worry about it. I don't want you to get worried about your itching. But the intention to be still and to be focused and to engage whatever the practice is that we're engaged in for 10 minutes starts from that moment that you are sat and you are giving that your attention for 10 minutes. Now that, because 10 minutes is quite a short period of time, it can be quite an intense time of focus. And so for a beginner to say 10 minutes of practice is useful because it's not frightening. You say to somebody, practice for 10 minutes every day, and they'll think, oh, I can manage 10 minutes. You know, 10 minutes is the length of a cup of tea, or the length of boiling an egg and eating it, or whatever. Yeah, I can fit in 10 minutes a day. That's not scary. I can do that. And so you set up your space, you set up how you're going to do it, where you're going to do it, you understand what you're going to do. Everything is ready. And you sit there, and I actually use one of these interval timers that exercise people use. And I have it, the one I've got now has got a very nice gong sound on it. So it's not a nasty whistle or bell or anything. It's a very nice gong. And so as soon as I'm ready to sit for whatever length of time I've decided I'm going to sit, I press start and I put, it's actually on my mobile, I put it out of sight. And I don't have to worry about the time. I don't have a clock in view. I don't have to worry about that at all. That is taken care of. At the end of my period of time, whatever it is, that gong will sound. And I know I have completed my intention. Now that's an important factor, is intention. It's better to intend to have a 10-minute focus of practice. That's practice that is actually practice, not preparation for practice and getting distracted, actual 10 minutes of practice every day, than to think, oh, but 10 minutes, surely that's not long enough. I should be practicing for, oh, at least half an hour, surely. And find half an hour really hard. Find that half an hour is just too much to stay focused, that you become sleepy or your mind just becomes so distracted that it's really difficult to stick with it. That 10 minutes, as when you're first starting out, is a really useful length of time, because it's long enough to make progress, but it's short enough to not be intimidating. So that's why we started with that period of time. Now, if you are practicing for 10 minutes and the gong goes dong, and you think, well, actually, I'd quite like to do a bit more, you can always press start again and do another 10 minutes. But having decided to do that 10 minutes, then stick with it and stick with that decision. We have a saying, there's no such thing as a bad meditation session. So to have decided to meditate, have engaged in the practice for the period of time that you set, and to have completed that is a success. Now, whether you were able to let go of thought, if you're practicing Shi-nè, or enter the dimension of the movement of thought, if you're practicing Latong, we'll talk about this more in the next session. But if you have actually stayed with it, stayed focused, if you haven't trodden on your hose pipe so that your pond is continuing to fill with water, then that 10 minutes is an extremely valuable length of time. And that 10 minutes over as a daily occurrence will build and will grow. Imagine how much water would go into your pond if you left your hose on full for 10 minutes every day. It's quite a good amount of water going in there. If you do that for a week, yeah, it's a good amount of water gone in there. Do it for a month, 6 months, a year. That's quite a reasonable length of time that you have actually engaged in focused practice. Now, if you do maintain that for, let's say, 3 months, I almost guarantee that you'll be practicing longer than 10 minutes after 3 months. If you truly find the place that you can sit, find the place where you can be comfortable, find the place where there are minimal distractions, and you've set everything up correctly, and you have set it up so you have those 10 minutes of focus. I'm loath to say I guarantee it, but I do almost guarantee it, that after 3 months, you will have changed your 10 minutes to 15 or 20. And then your hose pipe is filling up the pond even better. And then maybe after a year or two, you might find that that has gone up to an hour a day. And an hour a day is a very good period of focused practice. That is seriously going to enable you to discover reality, discover the nature of mind. But don't try and run before you can walk. Don't feel that, oh, but 10 minutes, what can 10 minutes achieve? I don't know, maybe Einstein wrote the theory of relativity in 10 minutes. Who knows? The mind is a wonderfully creative and potent thing that if we give ourselves 10 minutes to just be with the nature of mind, maybe we could become enlightened on 10 minutes a day. who knows? But that will naturally grow as you practice. So I've pretty much come to time.
Yes.
Are there any more questions?
Not at the moment, no.
So that is the basic setup for establishing your practice. Now, in the next session, I'm going to talk more about what the practice is and why it's so important, and ways that we can support that practice so that we are able to maintain that practice in the long term. Now, if you have any questions that occur to you before the 24th, then just jot them down somewhere and I'll be very happy to answer them in the next session. So thank you very much for coming tonight. Do please tell all your friends. It's been a select gathering today. Remember to do your 10 minutes a day. I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.